Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the July 15th meeting of the Skokie Plan Commission. Before we start, I'd like to welcome two new members to our commission. Talia Gavaharu, I'm sorry, and Mike Shaw.
Thank you.
Thank you. So welcome, and I hope you find we're glad you're on you're meeting with us today. First case. Before we go to the first case tonight, I'd like to move to have the minutes from the last meeting approved. So moved. Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you. First case tonight is case 2021-19P, a special use permit request. And is the petitioner here?
Yes.
Please come up. Introduce yourself. Yes, right up to the podium. You are?
Yeah. Joey Carr.
Could you speak louder or?
Yeah, no problem. Okay.
Speak better down.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Joey Carr. Hello, everyone.
Mr. Carr?
Yeah.
And how are you in relationship to the petitioner?
Yeah, I'm a consultant to the petitioner to help them submit for and apply for the special use permit.
Okay, very good. Is anybody in your party going to give testimony tonight, or?
Yes.
Could you have them stand up and I'll swear everybody in?
Yeah. Milos.
Please stand up, gentlemen. Please raise your right hand. You to serve. Do you affirm that the testimony you give tonight is the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth to help you?
Yes.
Yeah. Counselor, is there notice and order?
Yes, notice is proper and correct.
Okay, very good. Okay, Mr. Carr, could you just give us an overview of your project?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and see everyone tonight. Good to be back in person. So we're here to apply for a special use permit for operating a crematory at 7309 Monticello in a 5,400 square foot building. We're in the M3 zoning district, so it's an allowed use but requires a special use permit. Here's kind of the existing building here today. Currently it's KBK Tools, but it's basically kind of a vacant building right now. So the idea is to put a crematorium in here with 2 retorts, update the parking to get rid of the tandem, and operate a crematory here. Tonight with me, and will be available for questions if need be, is the funeral home director, Milos Georgeovich, who's now a funeral director at a different site at the Skorsky Funeral Homes. He currently offers cremation services, but would actually use this facility for those cremations that he doesn't do on site now. And basically that business has been a growing business and necessitates now this facility. Also with us, Jacob Pardoon, who works for Cremation Services and Armel CFS. They supply the actual ovens themselves, so he can answer any questions to do with that. And then John Benoit of B Architects, our architect that produced these drawings and eventually could do more of the permit set and construction set and things like that. Staffing will be minimal on site for a service like this, 1 to 2 people anticipated. It's a new business. It'll probably start a little slow and then hopefully pick up over time. As a part of this process, obviously it's a heavy regulated type business. So there's, state and county and obviously, local codes and requirements, and we'll obviously submit and get all the proper licenses and documentation, and when we submit for permit, follow all the proper fire code and things like that. As far as the building itself, most of the improvements will be on the inside. As you can see here, there's the retort room with the 2 ovens. There's some existing offices here, and then there's the kind of the main building entrance there. So, that's kind of the basics of what we're trying to accomplish here.
Okay. Any questions of the petitioner by the commissioners? Any questions?
I have questions.
Yes.
So this is spatially only crematory, not the funeral service, correct?
Only crematory.
So do you have a deal or any contract with other funeral home?
The business owner owns a separate funeral home. So
is
this will
it-
be an appendage to that business.
Any other questions? Yes, Commissioner Berman?
Sorry, I'm just trying to understand the business a little
Yeah.
Just to see how, questions that might come up from neighbors, how do the remains arrive at the facility?
Yeah.
Does it come in a hearse or in a panel truck or?
Sure.
Could you come up to the podium, please? Sure. As you come up, please introduce yourself for the record.
Hi, good evening. I'm Milos Georgeovich. I'm the owner of Caring Cremations as well as part owner of the funeral homes, the Skorsky and Setagora Funeral Homes in Chicago. To answer your question, it's typically a removal vehicle. It's a van that's been customized to hold remains in a cot, typically.
So rolled in the loading dock on like on a gurney or something like that?
Exactly.
Put it
Yes.
in our terms, my terms?
Yes.
Okay, what about air quality concerns? What's the filtration like or what have you relative to the exhaust of
In
the
the
actual
facility?
process? In the facility?
So there will be refrigeration where the remains would be.
No, but I'm
Capped
talking
up.
about for what is discharged from the actual burning?
He would have you answer.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jake Pardoon from Cremation Systems. We manufacture their machines, and our emissions are basically just CO2. They're all registered and approved by the state of Illinois and on file with the state of Illinois. We are considered a small source in the state of Illinois, which basically means that our emissions are less than 5 tons of particulate matter. That's what Ross basically makes standards. So if we were to run our machine every single minute of every single day, we would still fall short of the 5 tons of particulate matter that Ross implements in the state. The federal government considers our equipment a minor source and chooses not to regulate it. We have had, numerous EPA tests done as far as a visible smoke test, and we've passed with flying colors. So to answer your question, the emissions are basically just CO2, and we're registered with the state of Illinois, and all of our files are up to date and on file with the state.
So is there visible smoke that comes out or
No, there is no
No?
visible smoke that comes out
Just
of the
purely a
cremator.
CO2 discharge? No
Correct.
particulate of any kind?
There is some very trace amounts of particulate, but like I said, it's been approved by the state. No environmental concerns or no health concerns involved with it.
And are there regular maintenance requirements for the filtration and what have you, and are those?
So
in-
to answer your question, the state does not require maintenance. However, we do recommend annual preventive maintenance inspections. And basically what those inspections do is we check the emission controls. We check to make sure all the piping's working correctly. There's no gas leaks or anything like that. So the equipment's running efficiently and properly.
And are we requiring, Steve, that annual inspections at all to make sure the equipment's running properly?
I believe the state does most of the regulation. There was a comment from the environmental health. I don't know the answer to your question directly, but I know that our environmental health supervisor did put a comment to make sure that they followed all the state rules. I don't know whose jurisdiction it is to.
Yeah, but it sounded like it's only recommended unless we require it.
Yeah.
So yeah, you are correct, but I mean, like I said, we do recommend that our customers do it. I mean, and we obviously don't want any emission problems with any of our machines either. We do monitor them remotely as well. So if we do, see any issues, then we can, step in and say, hey, what's going on? So yeah, we like I said, the state doesn't mandate it, but it's good for us to make sure that our customers are following up and doing preventive maintenance so that, there's no concerns.
So if we required it, you as the manufacturer wouldn't be upset about it?
Not at all. Not
Would
at
the
all.
business owner be upset about it if we required it?
No, I don't think he would be.
Hold on a second.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Yep.
Yes.
Could you elaborate a little bit on the business? How does your business work? So you receive essentially clients
Sure.
through your funeral home?
Sure. So I have three separate businesses, 2 funeral services, 1 cremation service. So for this, it's mainly the cremation service, and some of the funeral homes as well, but it's a much smaller much smaller number of people. For the cremation service, typically a family would call and do the arrangements over the phone and online, and then we would do the transportation from either their private residence or nursing home or hospital. Typically, some families do want to come in, and they come into our funeral home location and sit down and do the arrangements in person if they choose.
Okay, so you're not doing those arrangements or goodbyes, so to speak, at this facility. You're only using this for the cremation
Correct.
of your clients' loved ones.
That's right. Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay.
Just to actually
Yes.
add something to
Sure.
that, I just want to be clear. Some families do choose to witness the cremation. It's not often, but that might change over time. They do want to come in and see the body enter the machine at times. And I do want to provide that service.
And so how many family members would be given you're looking for parking reduction?
It's not meant to
Relief.
be a visitation, like your traditional funeral home visit. It's just for identification purposes. So as of right now, what we do is we just ask the immediate family, and it's typically 2 or 3 people that want to come in and see the actual cremation container go into the machine.
Anyone else? Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
And if you'll step down, I'll have our staff, Steve Marciani, give the staff report.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to request that the staff report for case 2021-19P be submitted into the record as presented.
Your request is granted, thank you.
I don't have much to add to the petitioner's presentation. Commissioner Matei, you had some questions about parking and the number of visitors. We have based off of the transportation engineer's recommendations, we have a limit in the conditions to no more than 5 people to accommodate the parking that's on site. That would be 2 employees, and there's 5 other parking spaces, so we're limiting it to that as a recommendation. Other than that, there's some minor changes that need to be made to the site plan. I would like confirmation from the petitioner that those are able to be made.
Do you know if there are any special building permits required for a facility like this?
Not from the village. There might be something on the state level, but I'm not qualified
Okay.
to answer that question. I don't, Matt, do you know any differently? We don't have any special permits for this kind of, it would just be regular building permits.
Yeah.
Yeah, just the mechanical.
Mechanical, right.
The electric, we would certainly be
And
aware
of course, the fire department looks at the building and,
Right.
But
Ju-
it's, the specialty equipment, I'm sure, is installed by the manufacturer or,
We usually require spec sheets on
yeah.
specific machinery that
Okay.
isn't common.
Steve, the relief from parking, what was the formula? I believe it was 17 is what was required?
16 are required based off of.
16?
So when, if, for most categories in the business group, if it's not specifically listed, it defaults to 1 per 300. So that's what it would be at 1 for 300 square feet. Minus the loading dock, which we don't count. And then there are 7 on site, so that's how many they're providing. We provided a limitation on occupancy based off of the number of parking spaces that are available in order to justify or to get our positive recommendation on the relief that they're requesting for a reduction in parking.
Okay, and the parking in this area, this is probably was originally a single-use operator, I believe, and through the years it's been sort of chopped up.
Most of the buildings around here were probably single use at one point.
Yeah.
Some of them have been divided into other uses. There's a lot more driving now than there was then, which is why we had a special program in this area to allow some parking in the public way. So some of their parallel, or some of their 90-degree spaces are actually in our public way, but that's not uncommon up and down the street. In many areas, or in this particular part of town, we do allow tandem parking. It's the only place that we allow tandem parking And that is not, they're not allowed to have any other people in those tandem spaces, because the tandem spaces are intended for people who you know who's in front of or behind you, so you can ask them to move, like they're working in your place of business. And that's, but it's all public parking spaces, so we're saying that they're not allowed to do that as a condition of this use.
So will these 5 spots actually be, have a raised curb so that it doesn't necessarily infringe on the other? Because you're right, that's often how these cars park, is tandemly, because they know, like you said, who's in front of you. I see that the way that this is laid out gives the backup in order to be able to get out of the spots. But will they actually be cordoned off? Because the parking lot currently is sort of just open.
In general, other people don't park in people's parking lots that look like this, because then it looks like it's the parking for that specific user.
Sure.
So it is set up differently. It's not cordoned off. We're just asking for restriping and adding of the handicap space.
Will they have stops for them, the spots?
I'm not understanding your question, like a wheel stop at the
Yeah,
end?
like the wheel stops.
Yes, there are wheel
Okay.
stops. I believe there
Okay, so it's not curbed off, but it'll have wheel stops. It
There
delineates.
are wheel stops. They need to be moved 2 feet away from the edges, but, which I didn't put on here, so can you move those 2 feet away? So that the overhang is adequate.
Great, thank you.
Okay, any other questions, commissioners, staff? Okay, thank you, Steve. At this point, can I ask the petitioner to come back up, please? I have a quick question. The transport vehicle used to move the body, could you come up?
Yeah.
Your transport vehicle, will that vehicle be parked on the site when not in use?
Yes,
Okay, so it'll occupy one of the spaces.
yes.
Okay. Steve, do you want to say
Just
something?
for point of clarification, would it be in the garage? You have a
Could
loading
be.
space? Yeah, sorry, on
Yeah.
the other one it
Oh,
shows.
okay.
So there's actually a depressed, it's not a full depressed dock, right? It's like partially down? Yeah, which goes into a, Joey, can you switch the things on there? Which goes into a loading area, so the vehicle could potentially pull directly into the building.
Okay,
So that's like an additional, it's a parking space, but we don't include it if it's for a vehicle.
Well, that's why I'm
that's
asking
owned
if
by
the
them.
vehicle's
That's why it
gonna be
wasn't included in
there.
the parking count,
it's
yeah.
gonna take up one of the spaces, but if you're gonna leave it in the garage.
We can leave it in the garage too.
Okay. Does-
Point of
Yes.
clarification, is there only one? Or do you have multiple vehicles that are?
We will have just one.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Sure.
All right, at this point, I'd like to invite anyone in the audience who has a comment or question to please come up. Anything related to this case. As you come up, please give us your name, your address for our record.
Good evening, I'm John Haben, 8051 Lincoln Avenue, Skokie. And good evening.
Good evening.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, staff. I stand before you to, because I'm a longtime professional in the same industry. And I thought it would benefit the commission to perhaps pose some questions, a couple of which have already have been answered, but just to maybe shed some light on our industry and so forth. The concern being is the proposed facility and actions and services performed here be used for services normally and legally provided by or as a quote-unquote funeral home as defined by the Village of Skokie ordinance. Obviously, we're dealing with a cremation service. My concerns is, well, is it infringing on what a funeral home is licensed to do? And consequently, may be subject to funeral home rules, regulations, Department of Funeral Service regulation, and the like. So a question might be, what might be the exact timetable from when a human remains is delivered to the facility and then when cremation can be performed. In the industry, we may take custody of human remains at a particular hour, but then again, we may not be able to cremate due to permits and filings of certificates and so forth for a matter of days. So my question is, will this be a storage facility for traditionally, most of which may be unembalmed human remains? It's been answered that there will be climate control facility somewhere here. I don't see it on your graphic here. But again, for public health reasons, that would be important. Are the petitioners inviting families not only to perhaps be there for witnessing the start of the cremation, perhaps a last goodbye, if you will? Will there be an opportunity for viewing or identification of the remains at this facility? And the reason I ask that is typically professional funeral director would prepare the remains for such a request. Hence, we're infringing on the duties and licensing of a funeral home, which first and foremost is to take custody of human remains and prepare them. The climate control facility, storage of human remains, professional preparation of the deceased, which may be requested for viewing, identification, and so forth. Again, all lend themselves to preparation of the deceased or dead, which requires, again, the funeral home licensing, special use permit, as funeral homes are required, and of course zoning. So again, just to shed some light on cremation arrangements and such. And I understand, I've been told that, okay, a 5-person limit twice a month, you might consist of public coming to the facility. Will they be family members? And again, I guess for what purpose? Doesn't sound like arrangement conferencing will be conducted here, but perhaps it might. But the concern is, okay, will there be family having the last goodbye, viewing the deceased, of a prepared deceased, and then, of course, hence, now you're falling under the category of a funeral home. So just want to make that clear, because obviously funeral homes are different than cremation services. So that would be something obviously to consider and to find out. If again, infringing on a funeral home licensing and zoning versus a cremation service. Commissioner Berman, just to answer your question, the village does not have rules, regulations, maintenance requirements for a crematory. However, the county and state does. So at any particular time, they can come to a cremation facility, inspect, and so forth. A professional operation will have annual maintenance just to keep their machinery operating and safely. Right. So those are pretty much inspections, if you will, which obviously we're open door to do that in the cremation service. So for what that's worth, just a little more information on on the cremation industry, so.
Well, now you posed a new situation here. I mean, if they are, if you think they're in a gray area where they're operating at the fringe of being a funeral home, or are they a funeral home, or is this a service? Are there, I guess there's certain licensing for funeral homes and funeral homes with crematory, or is there a separate crematory off-site permit? I don't know, as far as in a funeral service, in a funeral business.
Both are licensed by the state of Illinois. There's a crematory statute, and obviously a funeral home statute. Licensing is a little different, but yes. I mean, obviously, the petitioner has a funeral director's license, so obviously he's able to take care of getting to this point. From this point on, as long as you satisfy, local or county or state, you can perform this form of disposition. Like a cemetery. Cemetery licensed in some fashion, but yet not under the professional funeral regulation.
Matt, do you have any comments on that as far as, for moving in an area that we shouldn't be as far as licensing?
Well, I am wondering how they overlap and,
Yes.
what a crematorium license in regard to visitation and service, just how far they can go in those areas,
Mhm.
as opposed to a funeral director's license, and how that's different. And if, I don't know, either the applicant or Mr. Haven can shed further light on that, I'd be interested.
Counselor, would we be at the village, as the village, we would be open to any challenges if we granted the special use and to find that we're in an area where we shouldn't be as far as regulating funeral homes?
Well, I imagine it would just, they're applying for a permit or a special use permit for a cremation service, so I believe if they fell outside of that realm, that they could potentially lose that special use.
Okay. So the village wouldn't be held,
Or if they're operating in the gray, and if they're operating more as a funeral home, I'm sure the state or the county would probably also take action.
Go ahead.
It's a matter of gaining the special use permit, can't we, and aren't we already requiring that they have all appropriate licenses and operate within the scope of those licenses?
Yeah, but we're like,
It's not, I mean, we're just talking about use for their facilities, not whether or not they're duly or properly licensed to conduct that activity, are we? It's up to the
well, that's what we're trying to
state.
determine.
I think the issue is kind of the creep of this type of use, that it's, the applicant may set out to just do the crematorium portion, but at some point, you start to
move.
see people, in actual services being held, or that sort of thing.
Okay.
And then what is the enforcement on our end? We would have to rely on the county and the state to enforce,
I see, okay.
so.
I don't think they have a room for a funeral home, do they? As far I know, I don't think they have a room for the funeral home. This is only for they applying a special permit for crematory service.
True.
True.
And we do have in here that the petitioner shall comply with all federal, state statutes, laws, rules, and regulations, and all village codes, ordinance, rules, and regulations. Now, if we don't have any ordinances or village codes, then maybe shame on us, but otherwise it's regulated by, it would seem like the state and county, and the federal government, and we're requiring it, that they adhere to it.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, we will.
May I make a statement just before,
Yes.
just to be clear, we're looking at a special use permit based on our special use table.
Mm-hmm.
That table defines certain uses as permitted, special, or accessory, or restricted. Our definition of funeral home is an establishment that prepares the dead for burial or interment and conducts funerals, that is, providing facilities including chapels for wakes, arranging for transportation for the dead, selling caskets and related merchandise, and may provide cremation services. That's the full scope of funeral home. So cremation services can be part of a funeral home. We also have a separate use called cremation services, which is just the cremation part.
Mm-hmm.
So for our purposes, whatever is not under our jurisdiction for my, as a planner, it makes no difference to me. But what I want to, if your question is about clarifying whether or not it's a funeral home or not, there's your definition of funeral home. It either meets that definition or it doesn't. They are
That's-
asking
that
for
is
up to.
our definition.
Right, that's our definition, and that's what we have jurisdiction over.
Okay.
And Counselor, please jump in if I'm off base here.
So Steve, what's the definition then of a crematory?
We don't have a definition in our ordinance for a crematory, so it would be the standard dictionary definition. Or something that we could reference that is commonly used.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Steve.
So
Mr.
again, the concern is, would the service infringe on what a funeral home is zoned, licensed, and permitted to be? Through many years of experience, I have a family coming to the crematory or funeral home to say their goodbye, limiting to, next of kin or member of a family. Sometimes we get 50 people show up. They just didn't hear our rules and regulations, and those are stemmed by volume of people, health reasons, and public health reasons and so forth. Can you imagine what it would look like? And this happens. You just don't have control over that. Monticello is going to be lined with cars coming from all over the city. I've seen it. I've done, whether it be a cemetery cremation or a funeral home cremation or what have you. So, because they want that last goodbye and they want to perhaps see mom one more time. Necessitating preparation of the dead, which is a funeral home duty, licensed zone and permitted to do that. So, call it a gray area, but just forewarning that this is the industry, this is services we provide, and all of that can happen.
Okay, all right.
So,
Thank you, Mr. Hedman.
you're welcome. Thank you.
Petitioner, would come up and... Okay, first of all, you've heard the report from the staff, and now you've just heard comments from people in the audience. And do you have a rebuttal to all this, or?
Just to answer the question, sir.
Could you speak to us, please?
Sure. I have a funeral home right in Chicago where we do those things that the gentleman mentioned. For us, because we do such a high volume of cremation services, instead of outsourcing and using somebody else's crematory for cremations, we would like to have our own so we can control everything from the phone call onwards. So this will be a crematory, not a funeral home. We have a funeral home in Chicago. But if families do want to witness the cremation, we will allow that, but not viewing of the body.
So you do understand the scope of your business legally?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
It's an interesting point about the refrigeration. There is nothing on the plans relative to refrigeration.
Well, I don't know about the plans, not having it, but we have to have that. That's a necessity.
Is there any space requirement or anything relative to the volume that's anticipated? Originally, you were talking about 2, going up to maybe as much as 6 a day. Is that what I remember? Is there a volume requirement? Where in this plan is that size room going to be?
So we do have additional
Could you
space.
have your name, please?
I'm John Benoit with BE Architects. We do have additional refrigeration space if it's required. We've consulted with our MEP engineer, and we do have adequate space to comply with what's required in terms of cooling capacities. We still have to coordinate in terms of actual volume that we'd be processing, but we do have the space, and we have it anticipated in the plan adjacent to the actual retort facility.
Okay.
So is that something our health department, though, should be involved in, to make sure that, especially if they're not inbound, and to make sure that there's adequate
I can't speak to the funeral capacity of that, but in terms of the mechanical capacity, we're required and we will comply with all codes required by the state of Illinois and Skokie in terms of cooling capacities and mechanical requirements.
So there will be on-site storage of decedents?
Yes.
And the anticipated time from the time they are viewed often at the funeral home, then brought to the crematory,
I would say.
Could you answer into the microphone so we get you on
Yes.
the record?
and then the time of the actual cremation?
Sure.
What do you usually envision?
As Mr. Haben mentioned, it's typically a few days. It really depends on how quickly the doctor signs the death certificate. Once the doctor signs the death certificate, we then apply for the cremation permit, and then the cremation can take place. So anywhere between, typically, between 48 hours to a week, I would say, is the norm.
So there's a fair amount of storage then, given.
That's correct.
And then the prep prior to, was a question as well. Is that typically done at your funeral home?
So it depends on what kind of services the family has chosen. If they're having a viewing, a visitation prior to the cremation, then yes, there are prep services, but those are done at the funeral home, and the visitation takes place at the funeral home, not at the crematory.
I have a question. So are you be storing the body at the funeral home or at the crematory?
If they're having a viewing at the funeral home, we have a storage facility at our funeral home and preparation room as well. Yes, sir.
Hate to harp on it, but so are there industry standards, are there county guidelines in terms of the cubic feet of cold storage you have to have relative to the volume you're gonna have for, or anticipated to have for two, I forgot what you call them, interesting name, but, for the, retorts for the ovens?
I'm not sure, actually. I can't answer that.
Steve, has the health department weighed in? Should they weigh in?
Do you know the answer to that, Mr. Hamel? I don't know. It is a good question.
No, nothing that I'm aware of for storage. I mean, climate control storage is certainly the purview of the funeral director. Many funeral homes do not have it, okay? If they do any type of volume, they should have it. They're not required to have it, but just for public health reasons, not everybody is embalmed. So, not to get graphic, but, without embalming, depending on the environment, decomposition of the body takes place rapidly, depending on its environment, temperature, that type of thing. So if any funeral service facility is worth their weight, they would have cold storage, but no, there aren't any. You do 10 bodies a week, you need 50 square feet of cold storage. No, there's nothing like that to my knowledge.
Thank you.
Steve, do you want to weigh in?
Well, just to answer Commissioner Berman's question, the Environmental Health Department statement was provide copies of any and all necessary permits, licenses, and supporting documentation required by the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, the Illinois Pollution Control Board, and the Illinois Office of the Comptroller authorizing the construction and operation of the crematory. So it sounds like this is all on other jurisdictions.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we have the floor plan here. I'm curious, if we knew we needed storage, why isn't it on there?
So we've anticipated it spatially. We haven't gotten to the point in the design process yet where we've actually calculated which piece of equipment would be required in that space. We've allowed the space for it. We haven't proceeded with the specification at this point.
And in particular, on your drawings there, it's on the bottom right where the notes are. I assume that's the only space, because everything else is pretty much allocated, correct?
Will you have those plans ready by the time this case reaches the board of trustees?
Likely, when's that supposed to occur?
Well, I think that's gotta be.
Oh, yes,
Steve,
yeah,
can
we
you
could
chime in on that
have
or
that on
too?
there for sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Could you?
It's generally about a month, and just another point of clarification. The floor plan is not included in the conditions because we don't regulate the
That's
interior
right.
design. So, I mean, it's fine to ask the questions, but I'm saying from our purposes, it's the site plan.
Right, when
I
we
mean,
go in for
we
permit,
do have a floor plan on here with the date. We
But
need to
the-
date it, but we know that this is the final one. So we're just asking for a dated site plan and floor plan, but what's important to us is for the issue of parking because of the relief
And the special use.
and for the special use.
We could
for
make
the-
it a requirement of the special use permit that there be adequate refrigeration for the anticipated volume.
I guess we could. I don't know.
Well, I think at minimum, the plan should be
I don't know,
updated.
we would not be
The plan
equipped
should
to
be
determine
updated
that.
before it
Right.
goes to
And
For the
that,
trustees.
the trustees.
and that
And
was
that
one of the
seems
conditions that
reasonable.
prior to the hearing of the Board of Trustees, that they need to date the plans, because we know that they're not.
right, I mean, typically, right, that would be part of when we submit for a construction permit, to have
Yes.
then a fully engineered set, and that's when that stuff would be submitted, reviewed by the
Well-
officials at the city to make sure it's code compliant and for the proper use, et cetera.
Well, I believe it'll go before the Board of Trustees before it goes into the permit process.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you'll need to have the plans ready, or we would like to have the plans ready by the time it reaches the Board of Trustees.
We can talk to our engineer and get some more
Just
details
work it
on
out
that.
with the department.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, procedurally, if Mr. Berman would like to amend condition 1 to include that condition, I would probably,
That's just one of my
you're
amendments.
welcome to do that. I mean, we'll need to move the wheel stops also, but I know they're gonna do that, but,
Okay. Okay, any other questions, comments? Gentlemen, do you have any further comments or?
No, thank
To
you for
offer?
everyone's time.
Okay, very good, thank you. At this point, then, I'm open for motion, and Commissioner Berman?
I'd like to make a motion,
A
I'd
mo-
like to make a motion, subject to two amendments. First one is that we require, from a health standpoint, that there be adequate refrigeration in the facility for the volume of cremations they plan on doing, and that be specified in the interior design plan prior to going to or in front of the village board. And then secondly, my second amendment would be that at least as a special use permit, that we require an annual inspection of all the equipment that is putting out any gas or particulate to make sure that it's in good working condition at least annually.
Can we make that kind of inspection? Are we qualified to do that?
Well, we can require them, the petitioner to do it.
That's exactly right.
Okay,
We can require the inspection, then they provide us with the paperwork showing that they passed.
got it, okay. We have a second to.
Oh, that was a
commis-
motion to approve with those two
With
conditions,
those two-
right?
Yes, sorry if I didn't say that right.
Do we have a second to Commissioner Berman's motion? Ross? Commissioner Matei, thank you. Okay. Okay.
Mr. Chair, just
Yes.
for a point of clarification, the first one is something that's an amendment to number 1, that the requirement about additional refrigeration be added. Do you want a standard, a condition, normal condition to say there has to be adequate refrigeration, and then also there be something that it be added to the plan? Or are we just adding it to the plan?
You can add it to the plan if it's.
Okay.
if it's-
And then the operational condition is the one about requiring the petitioner must
Right.
provide an annual inspection to the village or something like that.
Right.
Okay. Call for the vote. Commissioner Mitchell is absent. Commissioner Quinn is absent. Commissioner Shaw?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Franklin?
Aye.
Commissioner, I'll get this, Gary Harvu?
Yeah.
I'll get close to it.
Yahoo, yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Commissioner Lakani is absent. Commissioner Berman?
Aye, yes.
Mr. Matei?
Aye.
And I'll vote aye. Motion passes. This still has to go before the Board of Trustees, They meet on the first and third Monday of every month, and I'm sure that the department will notify you prior to that meeting, and I'm sure you'll probably have more conversations with them up until then. So, good luck with your project, and thank you for choosing Skokie. Any other business before the board? And this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.